sometimes I question whether I should be doing this stuff. I think my sat-nav does too. Okay, so I'm at this property after multiple visits from engineers. I think 5 visits in 4 days. Oh, sorry, 5 visits in 5 days. I've arrived and the fuse is out the spur, and they're saying wires are out of the wiring centre and all sorts. So this is how I deal with wiring issues. First thing I'm going to do is gain access to in here so I can see how this bit's wired, and I'm going to do that throughout the house before I even put power back on. So this is what I find upstairs. I guess there's been some difficulties here if this is how I'm finding things. You know when you turn up to a job and you find the wiring centre like this? Maybe it's time to go home, innit? Okay, I'm going to freeze this shot for you in a sec. What I need you to know is this programmer is just a couple of metres away from the boiler on a different wall, and the wires directly from the boiler come into this. Okay, what you need to notice is where it says spare on the bottom there of the screen, you've got a white and a red wire that go into the spare point. Okay, the white wire is the pump live. Okay, and just above that you'll see a terminal block with 2 yellow wires into it. That is the switch live for the boiler. So we know the pump live goes in and turns red, and the switch live from the boiler comes in there and goes into it, continues to be yellow wherever it runs off to. So they're the first things I noticed. I also took a photograph of this for my own reference purposes, so when I'm upstairs looking at stuff I can compare it to the photo and see if I can work out what's logical. So I just want you to try and remember these things. And if you're new to wiring, I do suggest you watch this video several times. Okay, so I'm now back up here. I've seen what's behind that programmer. So having that information, which I've got on my phone, I've got photos of it now, I am going to go through these and try and work out which one of these is which cable downstairs. An easy way for me to do that will be, I'll try and work it out. If I'm unsure, I will take a red wire from one of the cores, join it to the earth, and then go downstairs and with a multimeter check if I've got continuity. That's an easy way to work out what wire's what, because none of these reds should be touching the earth, you would assume. But as everyone should know, heating system wiring has no colours, no rhyme or reason to why it's done the way it is. You just have to be very careful. Go on, give us a follow on Instagram. I could do with your help. Really appreciate it. Okay, so looking at my photos from downstairs, from the boiler, the pump wire goes into the pump live goes into a white wire. Then in the back of the timer, turns into a red wire. Okay, so this is the pump upstairs, this brown, and that goes into that red. So we've got 2 things we could assume here. That is correct, and that is the pump wire, or that is incorrect, and one of these 2 reds here that are joined together is the pump wire. Now, the assumption would be that that is correct, okay, because this system has worked recently, and I can't imagine someone's unwired all of that. Maybe they have, but that's the assumption we will make, that that pump wire is correct. So we now know what that core is. And in that core here we also have, so in that cable, yeah, that cable there, we have a yellow which is down there, which has nothing on it, and a blue which appears to be the main neutral for everything. So there's the blue wire, yeah, that's the blue wire that goes into that cable, goes in with another blue wire and the neutral for the pump. If we know this is the pump live and the cable it goes in with has what appears to be a neutral, what neutral should we have in this airing cupboard? What needs a neutral? Well, the pump needs a neutral. Let's go wide here. Okay, so in here, what needs a neutral? The pump needs a neutral, the motorised valve needs a neutral, the cylinder stat does not, but what often has a neutral that people forget about is a room stat. This has got an old Honeywell room stat downstairs. So there's 3 neutrals. And in here we have what I believe is the main neutral coming up there, a neutral disappearing off back into the wall, and the pump and the motorised valve. So that would mean this neutral here should go to the room stat. So whatever core that goes into, which is that core there with the X on it, that should be the room stat. And the yellow of that goes into the white, so that could be correct. So where does the red go? The red goes in with the reds. Now downstairs on the programmer, central heating on was red. So that would mean that is wired correctly as well. Alright, so now we just got to find hot water on and hot water off, so we can deal with this. And obviously we need to find our switch drive. So switch drive was yellow. Okay, going down to the boiler, back behind the programmer. So from up here, okay, there's only one yellow that's not being, oh no, there's 2 yellows not being used here, okay. So there's our 2 yellows not being used. One of them goes in with a pump wire, and the other one goes in with the blue, which is used as the hot water off. So hot water off was blue downstairs. Now I would assume, this may be completely wrong, that as that blue there, which is going in with the grey for the valve, which so it would be hot water off, and downstairs in the back of the programmer the blue is hot water off, okay, that going into that cable there, you would assume that cable also has this red, which is heating on. So you would kind of think whoever done that's got hot water off, that would be then hot water on, and that would then be heating on. So heating on, hot water off. That would be the logical way to wire that. So I'm going to go downstairs now and just check that the core, the cable, should I say, the cable that has these cores in it here, which is unmarked up this end, I'm going to go down and check that the yellow wire of that same cable that has the hot water off and heating on, that the yellow wire is hot water on. And if it is, we'll get that wired to the cylinder stat. But then we have to work out what's what on the cylinder stat. The assumption would be that brown is hot water on, and that would go in there. But we don't assume anything. We'll take the cover off the stat and find out. So let's go downstairs and check where the yellow core that is in with these cables here, which one of them is wired to the hot water off of the valve. Let's go and check where that yellow goes. Now I'm assuming that yellow of that cable will go into hot water on. So let's go down and have a look. There's the on there. So if I'm right, the heating on, which is, there's the heating on, and it does go into that core there, look. Yeah, the heating on, and the yellow for hot water on go into the same core, and then that by that would then mean that that blue is hot water off, and it is. You see they all go in there. So we've worked out what one of the yellows is up there. So let's get that bit wired up. Okay, so if we look at this, common is live, and in here, by the way, I'm using this one because it just picks up better on camera. So the brown is common, the blue, yeah, is number 1, and number 1 would be the call for heat. I need to be heated. So number 2, which is the earth with the red sleeving, is off. Okay, so that's hot water off. So we need to remember that, and we need to get that bit wired back up because this isn't wired at all. So let's get on with that. I'll come back to you when that is wired. FYI, I put that cable clamp on there. Okay, so here's our cylinder stat. We have hot water on going into the common. We have off, or the satisfied, going in with the grey. And that's how we know where that goes. It goes to the grey. The grey of any 3-port should have 2 wires going into it, 2 wires joining it. If it only has 1, it's a priority system. If it has 2, it's a full 3-port system, the way it's meant to be. Okay, so there's that. And now we have 1 wire left, which is the on, okay, which is the cool for heat. And funnily enough, the orange is out. So they go together, okay, because I don't know if any of you guys are aware or unaware of this. The orange wire on a 3-port valve, when you have a hot water demand on, the orange wire isn't actually supplying that 240 that you always go for and check. It's actually coming from the cylinder stat, because them wires are together. So when you have a hot water demand, the switch within the 3-port isn't doing anything. So the orange wire you could leave out. You could cut that wire off, and providing you've got hot water demand, the call from the cylinder will make the valve work. So what would happen there is you would get heating and water together, and you get water by itself, but you would not get heating on its own, because that orange wire is the only thing that tells the boiler to run when you have heating on its own on. Okay, other than that, it's done through the cylinder stat with the cool. So anyway, regardless of that, these two have to go together, but they have to join up with another wire that goes back to the boiler on the switch drive, which, as we only have 1 wire left out of all this mess here, which is this yellow here, which goes in with the pump wire, the core that tells the pump to run, okay, and also brings up the main neutral. There's no permanent live up here, remember, so that's the main neutral for everything to work. The only one that's left is this yellow, which it would make logical sense that that yellow is where these two should go, and that yellow would be the switch drive for the boiler. I can confirm that by looking over the photo I've already taken of behind the programmer downstairs. And what I should see is that this yellow wire goes in with another yellow wire that then goes, and that is the switch drive to the boiler. So I'm going to check that, and then I'm going to wire these two in there. And I mean, I don't know how I meant to make that look neat and fit it in that box, but anyway, that's regardless of all of that, the thing ain't working. Let's try and get it working, and then we'll worry about that afterwards. Here's the moment of truth. I've pushed that back in. Okay, hasn't blown a fuse, so let's go see what's going on. Obviously I've made the customer aware there's live electrics exposed both here and in the airing cupboard, and that they need to keep them and their pets away from it. Let's see what happens now when we go to the timer. Okay, so the original call out this customer made was because their heating would only come on the first time period of the day. Okay, I think there's a problem with the valve upstairs. Someone's changed the valve. So let's put the heating on without hot water demand. Okay, see if it comes on. Now remember, so it's the hot water off that motors over the valve, okay, for heating only. Now there's 2 hot water offs, isn't there? In with that grey wire, there's 2 different wires. One comes from the timer, and the other one comes from the cylinder stat. So let's say the timer's failed, and it's not sending the hot water off out of it, okay? In this situation here, that would cause the valve not to go to heating only. So let's see what's happening. It's on here. I'm going to turn the room stat up as I walk past, and we'll see what's going on up in the airing cupboard. Okay, so you can see I have my grey probe, my black probe in with the earths, and so there's the orange wire, which we always use as a guide. Now we have 240, okay? So that tells us the boiler should be getting power, and we should have, on the white wire which is here, we should have 240. Okay, yeah, and we do. Okay, and then there's one more wire should have 240 to make that valve motor all the way to heating only, and that is the grey, which is there. He says, oh, it's alright, it's just my other probes come out, so hold on. Drop that in with the neutrals now then. Okay, I've wedged that in with the neutrals here. So the grey wire is that one there, look. It should have 240. It's very hard to see this multimeter with the torch on this phone. On 240, okay. So everything that should have 240 does have 240. Now I'm going to turn the hot water on and come and check that everything is how it should be here. I'm just going to check the boiler's running downstairs as well. I'll leave all of this as it is and go down and do that. So, okay, so the boiler's running downstairs. We've now got a hot water demand on. So now with the hot water demand we should still have 240 here, which we do. That's on the orange. Now we should have 240 here, which is common to the cylinder stat, which we do. And we should not have 240 here on the grey, which we don't. So that appears to be working fine. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn down the cylinder stat as if the demand had finished and make sure done that. Now the valve should motor all the way over, which it appears to have done. So now I'm going to lose both demands and put the demand back on for the heating, but that does appear to have worked, and we should have no power on here now. And when we have got power, no, yeah, of course we should have power on there, that's from the programmer, but we shouldn't have power. We should have power here now, 240, which is on the grey, and we shouldn't, well, we've lost power there on the blue, but not on the orange is now taken over from the 3 port to provide the power there to the switch drive to the boiler. So that all appears to be working as it should. I'm just going to turn the programmer off for both and then turn it back on for both with the cylinder stat down and see what happens, and that way we've tested it in every possible situation it could be in. Okay, so now this is everything's on the timer, but everything is off on the thermostats. So now we should have nothing on here, and we don't. We have 86 volts. Now this is the backfeed voltage that will often make an RI run, so that you'll get the most significant voltage, backfeed voltage you get. Okay, that is created when the valve is in heating only, and then demand is lost for heating only. At that point there, where that valve is being held open by the synchro motor, is where you get this voltage, this 86 volts. Okay, so if your boiler runs with a voltage like this, 86 volts, you need to put a suppressor on it, which I've got a video coming up of that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn up the cylinder stat, and the valve should then motor back to hot water only, and we should then get 240 on them things. So beautiful. Heard the valve come back, and now we should have 240 on here, and we do. Okay, that's the orange wire there. So we've got 240 on there. So now the very last check I'm going to do, I'm going to lose power here. Okay, and I'm going to go and turn the room stat up, because right now the room stat has nothing on it, which is these, oh sorry, it does there, but coming back to the brown wire here it has nothing. Oh, What am I doing? That's not cylinder stat. Sorry, brown wire is not there. So white wire, sorry. There you go, got nothing on the white wire. Alright, so I'm going to turn the room stat up, and we should then get 240 on the white wire. We should already have 240 on this grey wire in here, and we do. So everything appears to be working as it should right now. Let's go turn the room stat up, and hopefully this all works, and if it does, we put this mess away, put all the covers back on, do some safety checks on the boilers, because we've had it all opened up. Just do the fags, and put the cylinder stat where it needs to be, and we're done. Or I'm done. Okay, so I've turned that room stat up now. So we should have 240 on the white here. And we do. And if the valve is motored over to where it was meant to, we should now have 240 on this here. And we do. So all of this is working as expected now. I don't know what the fault was, but as you saw when I arrived, it was all unwired. So we are good to go. That valve has now been tested in every position, and it can do what it's meant to do from every position, and with everything doing what it's meant to do, thermostat wise and timer wise. So every situation that could have been in, it has been in. I can't find any fault now that it's wired up. And I don't know if it was wired up correctly previously, I just know it wasn't wired up at all when I was here. Okay, there we are, all back together. All wired correctly and safely. Well, it's all wired correctly as a heating system would be. The box I've got quite neat. Yeah, there we go. So remember, at the end of all your tests, one last test for the case on to make sure everything's safe. Because if there's a problem with anything inside and there's any fumes recirculating, so you're getting incomplete combustion, it will show up on this test. Okay, well, safe to say that was all fixed. Just want to thank you guys for watching, and I just wanted to run something by you. I was thinking about setting up a Patreon account. I'm not too sure how that will go down, but I was definitely thinking about doing that. So I'd appreciate some feedback, and yeah, just let me know. Thanks a lot for watching.